All right, everybody, we welcome you in live here on a Tuesday, the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Hope everybody's had a great day. Hope everybody was able to shovel their way out of their driveway today. Want to dive right into this. I don't even care. I'm just jumping into it. We talked, obviously, we opened up the show yesterday. We dove right into the reaction. Ohio State finally, after 4 straight losses against that hated team up north, they finally come out on top, and they do it in dominating fashion. They do it in convincing fashion. It sets up a 1-versus-2 showdown against Indiana, 2 undefeated teams, Big Ten championship game Saturday night. We'll have all that for you right here on 1410 ESPN Radio, by the way. But when we've talked Michigan over recent years, yes, it's the typical Ohio State versus Michigan talk, yes, but it's also been about Michigan just not being the most morally upstanding program, right? Michigan has been known to bend the rules and sometimes not even bend them, to snap them in half, throw away the evidence, gaslight the hell out of you, media, the school, everybody, and still try to come out as being the victims. Michigan is always the victim, and I'm tired of it. There's something that happened today during a press conference with Ryan Day that got my attention. And I don't know if you guys heard it, but I want y'all to listen. I want y'all to pay attention to this. There is something that Ryan Day said during his press conference that makes you want to turn your head a little bit. Like, if you remember during the game late in the second half, there was a lot of chaos out on the field. Now, Ohio State had a commanding lead. That's not the point. This could have been a much bigger deal than what it ultimately ended up being. But there's a certain comment, there's a certain phrase. We'll get to it in a second. But Ohio State, their comms, went down between the head coach and the quarterback and Julian Sayin. Julian Sayin was having to sprint to the sideline to get the play call in because all their communication went down. All right? It happens. It was windy. It was cold. Stuff happens, right? Did something just happen out of nowhere, or was this Michigan kind of meddling a little bit? Listen to Ryan Day in the press conference earlier today when he was asked about how the team navigated through the comms unit going down.
Yeah, we lost communication there in the second half. But the good news was that earlier that week, I thought there may be an inkling that may happen. So we had a plan for it. We had a wristband plan, and then we would bring Julian over, and I was just getting us through it until we get the headsets back up and running, which took a little while to get done. But yeah, just by chance, we had a plan for it, and so we were ready to go when it happened.
Hold up. So just by chance? What does Ryan Day mean when he had an inkling? He had an inkling that something like this could happen. Now, you could say all good coaches are prepared for any kind of issue to go down in the middle of a game. But with Michigan, you always have to be ready for anything that they could throw your way. All right? And I see, yeah, Yogi says, how did he have an inkling? Exactly. How did he have an inkling? So that's the question we have. Yogi has that same question, but don't worry, because Buckeye Media had the same exact question for Mr. Ryan Day. Take a listen.
Sorry to interrupt. Inkling? Why did you have that inkling?
Oh, we're just ready for everything. Yeah, you just got to be ready for anything. And, when you go into any big game, you're always trying to put contingency plans in place for anything that could possibly happen. And so, yeah, that was in here on Friday, and I think some of the guys in the staff were looking at me sideways like, why would you think that would happen? I said, I don't know. We just got to be ready and be ready for anything. It's funny how your mind works.
So when Ryan Day said it's funny how your mind works, that's just the audio, okay? If you were watching the video clip, Ryan Day says it's funny how the mind works, and then he looked at the media, and he winked, and the media all begins to laugh. It's funny how the mind works. Ryan Day winks at the media. Everyone laughs because we all know what that wink means. He was tipped off. Somebody had warned him ahead of time that Michigan was going to do this. And guess what they did? They probably should have done it sooner, because by the time that they did decide to pull this stunt, Ohio State already had too much of a commanding lead. Michigan wasn't going to win that football game to begin with. But let's be clear. This is a pathetic program. It really is. And I know what's going to happen, and I think Yogi's doing it. I think some other, maybe not Yogi, but, others are going to question, well, how did he get an inkling? How did he get, how did he know? Does he have a mole inside? Does he have this? They're going to spin this on Ryan Day, having someone on the inside. I don't know how Ryan Day found out. I don't really care. Because the bottom line is he got an inkling. They prepared for it. Sure enough, it happened. It doesn't matter how he got the information, because the bottom line is you have to be prepared for anything when it comes to that cheating team up north. And they did it and tried it again. It wasn't a coincidence that their communication set went down when Ohio State was in the big house this past Saturday. It's not a coincidence. Michigan is a filthy, disgusting program. I mean, it's amazing to me, and it doesn't surprise me. It's one of the most prestigious universities out there. There's a ton of people with big brains there. They're able to come together and collaborate on some of the biggest, most conniving schemes possible that us common folk would never be able to comprehend or understand. Luckily, Ryan Day has a mole on the inside, if that's actually the case, to feed him information, because my goodness, the lengths that program will go to try to stick it to Ohio State. And let's be clear, I'm not the biggest Ohio State homer in the world by any means. I'm just not. But I truly believe that the whole cheating scandal started at Michigan because of the constant ass whooping that program was getting over and over and over. That cheating scandal happened because Jim Harbaugh is going to go down as one of the, outside of Schembechler, Jim Harbaugh is going to be right there, the second best coach in the history of that program. But let's not forget that the second biggest name and the second best coach in the history of that program was also about to have his ass canned. The second best coach in the history of that cheating ass program also was about to get fired. And to keep his job, he had to actually agree to take less money. Hey, we're going to keep you. You could continue coaching, but you got to give some of the money back that we told you we were going to give you. He had to agree to stay for less money. That's how bad of a job Harbaugh was doing for the longest time. What changed? It wasn't NIL. It wasn't, oh my God, we got our quarterback. J.J. McCarthy was a solid college quarterback, no doubt, but let's not sit here and act like the kid's anything special, because he's not. They started cheating. And once they started cheating, they started winning a lot of games and beating their rivals more than one, not just Ohio State, but Michigan State more consistently. They started beating Penn State. They started winning big games. Remember, Harbaugh had the reputation of not being able to win the big game. This program, anytime their back is against the wall, anytime that they start to feel like they are losing a grip on and control on anything, they cheat. They cheat. And if you're just tuning in, this isn't, oh man, Kenner, what the heck are we talking about the cheating scandal again for? It's because there's a pattern developing here. As Ohio State is beating Michigan, and as Ohio State has regained control of this, Michigan goes right back to what allowed them to take control of the rivalry to begin with, and that's they had to start cheating. The cheating scandal with Connor Stallions got them out of the ditch, allowed them to not just take over the rivalry, but dominate it. It was one of the biggest cheating scandals in the history of college football, and it was all because Ohio State, and it was all because they couldn't beat Ohio State. Ohio State, they knew heading into this matchup, this is a program that had already made a plan to defend the M in the middle of the field. They had already accepted that they were going to lose. They knew they were going to lose, and they already had it choreographed as far as how they were going to defend the M at the end of the game. They talked about it. That means before the game kicked off, they weren't confident they were going to win. They knew they were going to lose, which means they all gathered together to talk about what they were going to do to defend the M in the middle of the field to make sure Ohio State didn't go plant the flag. So they already had a loser mentality to begin with. Second thing, they knew they were going to lose this game, and because of that, they're like, well, we have to find a way to give ourselves some kind of advantage. We're going to find a way to screw with their communication line, and that's exactly what happened. If you're just joining us, Ryan Day had this to say at a press conference earlier today.
Yeah, we lost communication there in the second half, but the good news was that earlier that week, I thought there may be an inkling that may happen, so we had a plan for it. We had a wristband plan, and then we would bring Julian over, and I was, just getting us through it until we get the headsets back up and running, which took a little while to get done. But yeah, just by chance, just by chance, Ryan Day said he had a plan. But the key phrase in about that 20-second clip was he had an inkling. Why would he have an inkling that the communication was going to go down between him and his quarterback, Julian Sayin, late in the second half? Because it was premeditated. It was planned. Michigan didn't anticipate that the game would be as out of reach as what it was, but it was out of reach, so it didn't have an impact on it, luckily. But can you imagine if that was a tie ball game or a one-possession game and it had an impact? That's a problem. Troy says, Troy's a Michigan fan. Again, smarter than everyone here. Troy says, so why didn't they lose communication in the first half?
Capital L, capital M, capital A, capital O. He is laughing his ass off currently. Why would you need to cut the communication in the first half? Like I said, this is premeditated. It's planned. It went out in the second half. So in case this game is close, it was premeditated. They knew when they were going to cut this line short. That's exactly what ended up happening. But Ohio State had already kicked their ass so bad it didn't matter. But the bottom line is this is what your team does. Anytime that their back's against the wall, anytime that they get to a point to where they know they can't beat Ohio State, they go back to what they do best. It's what allowed them to dig themselves out before, win a national championship. You're cheating Coach Harbaugh. He bails for the NFL. He leaves crybaby, Sharon Moore to sit there and clean up the mess. I mean, I can't believe that dude cried. That dude cried on national TV, bawled his eyes out. Good for him. Good for him. For a coach that left him out to dry. Pretty unbelievable stuff. But they got caught cheating. Ryan Day was asked one more time. Troy, I want you to hear this. So, Troy, Ryan Day was asked one more time about, wait, did you say you had an inkling?
Sorry to interrupt. Inkling? Why did you have that inkling?
Oh, we're just ready for everything. Yeah, you just got to be ready for anything. And, when you go into any big game, you're always trying to put contingency plans in place for anything that could possibly happen. And so, that was in here on Friday. And I think some of the guys in the staff were looking at me sideways, like, why would you think that would happen? I said, I don't know. We just got to be ready and be ready for anything. It's funny how your mind works.
It's funny how your mind works. Troy says, so if it comes out that it was not done on purpose, will you talk about it for 30 minutes and lose your mind? It's 3:18. I started the show a few minutes late. Shame on me. I'm only on minute number 15. In fact, I could tell you when the recording started. We are at 12 minutes and 45 seconds, Troy. But I will be glad to go on. So Troy says, so if it comes out that it was not done on purpose, listen, he said he had an inkling. At the end of that quote, I know that was the only audio. He looked at the media and winked when he was done. The inkling, he got a heads up. He was told it was going to happen ahead of time. Ahead of time. Come on, Troy. Why is it so hard just to admit that your team is a bunch of scumbag cheaters? Why? Why is it so hard for Michigan fans to say, man, why does our program have to embarrass us like this all the time? You have a national championship with an asterisk next to it. Your only claim to fame is the dominating the rivalry for a short stint of time, all to put an asterisk next to it. Last year was a good, legit win, for all we know. But outside of that, the ones before that, cheating scandal. This year, had to resort to finding another way to cheat. Again, didn't work this time, though. Harbaugh would have made sure that the cheating worked. That's the difference between him and Sharon Moore. Harbaugh knew how to cheat and allow, that advantage to lead to him dominating and winning. Sharon Moore has a lot to learn, apparently. Michigan man. The Michigan way. Man, oh man. Go Bucks.
Back to the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kinner, 457-9464. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. Yeah, I just gave you the wrong number. That was a fumble on my end. That was like the old number. I haven't given out the old number in forever. I don't even know what that was. My apologies. 457-9464. That was like the number from that was the call-in number from years and years and years ago. I want to say pre-COVID. Anyways, let's start that over. In fact, we're going to start that all the way over. I want to start that all the way over.
To the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
All right, let's try this again. 937-518-1410. That's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. You could also text that same number. Ryan Day had an inkling that Michigan was going to cut the communication between the sideline and their quarterback. Ryan Day talked about it. He was asked about it. He gave his response. He talked about, you got to be prepared for everything. And then he winked at the media afterwards. Basically, Ryan Day, I've never seen somebody just completely turn this around. We talked about this with Jim Tressel last week. I have never seen a coach turn things around and not just get his team under control, but the media, everyone. Ryan Day could do no wrong right now. I mean, he could, but right now he's just knocking everything out of the park. Every time you give him the ball, he's burying the three. Every time you throw him a pitch, he's knocking it out of the ballpark. Right? Everything he's doing right now. What he's doing with Michigan right now is he's embarrassing them even after the loss. He knows what they're up to. And rather than going out and just, throwing him under the bus and dropping names, he's subtly doing it. He's throwing breadcrumbs out there so that the media can go and dissect all of this. After the game, he so badly wanted to say more than what he did. But it was all about the win. It's all about the next game. It was a lot of coach speak, and it annoyed me at first because I wanted Ryan Day to unleash, but he didn't. He didn't. And I actually appreciate it. I respect it. The immature fan in me wants him to talk his blank. I want him to laugh in their face. I want him to be a cocky, arrogant dude, but that's not what he's going to be. That's not what he is. And he kills them with kindness. I think he made them look bad. If you remember last year when Michigan won at the Shoe, you had Sharon Moore that was circling the field, mocking and laughing at Ohio State fans, which, again, I'm not going to sit here to pretend I have a problem with it. I don't have a problem with it. I thought he looked kind of goofy doing it, but hey, you got the last laugh. You won. Do your thing. Ryan Day had the chance to do the same thing. That's why the camera panned to him. They cammed to the middle of the field. They wanted to see what was going to erupt. And what Ohio State did, and probably deep down, they would have had every right to do it. They would have had the right to go plant a flag in the middle of the M at the Big House. I would have loved that, to be honest. I'm not going to pretend to be a do-gooder. I'm not going to pretend to be one of those that you got to respect the rivalry, this, that, and the. I don't give a rip about that. You let them know. You go let them know. I would have been fine with that. I'm also fine with finding a different way to embarrass them, which is by doing nothing. Michigan made Ohio State look like that was their Super Bowl. You know what Ohio State did to Michigan this past Saturday? You're just one of the many boxes that we're checking off this season. Beat Texas to kick off the season? Check. Undefeated through non-con? Check. Beat, win on the road, go undefeated on the road? Check. Beat your rivals? Check. Finish this regular season undefeated? Check. Beat Michigan? You check that off. Now, when you beat your rival, yes, you want to celebrate it, have a good time with it, but it's just one of many accomplishments that you're checking off along the way. Michigan last year, that wasn't just a check. That was their season, just like it is every year. Ohio State, what they proved, and this is the part about Ryan Day and the Buckeyes that I appreciate right now, you beat Michigan, you smile, you kill them with kindness, and you let them know we're not done. That game is their Super Bowl. This game is one of many big games that we play all season because our bar is set higher. And Ryan Day right now, he killed them with kindness, and I thought he made Sharon Moore look like a jackass. I thought he made the entire Michigan program look like a bunch of fools. And I thought he embarrassed them again today because he just subtly put it out there. I got an inkling that they were going to do it, so we were just prepared for it. And then he winked at the media. And then he moves on. He doesn't show, like he's not going to give them the satisfaction of showing them anger or emotion or anything. It's just simple. Here's what happened. I had an inkling it was going to happen. Do with that what you will. And then he moves on to the next thing. Ryan Day, Michigan won 4 straight. Ryan Day just won his second game against Michigan. But Ryan Day did more with 1 win than what Michigan did with all 4 of those straight wins combined. Because what Ryan Day let Michigan know on Saturday was, oh, thank goodness, we got this done. Next, enjoy your irrelevant bowl game, Michigan. Have a good offseason, you bunch of cheating scumbags. I mean, my goodness. So Troy says, one report said that the home team has nothing to do with road team communications. You lost it. I lost it? What do you mean I lost it? I don't understand. I lost it. What did I lose? I didn't lose anything. One report. What report are you talking about? Are you talking about, Shaw's opinion on Go Blow or Go Blue, chat board? What are you talking about? What report? And by the way, I agree that they probably don't have anything with their team communications, but it is the big house. It is their house, and they have a lot more control. He got an inkling. He was told something like this might happen, and it happened. You think that's a coincidence? You think that with your school's track record, Mr. Troy, you think that with your school's track record that this is just a coincidence? Your dirty, cheating scumbag of a program, you think that it's just a coincidence that Ryan Day got an inkling that the communication headset was going to go out, and it did? You think it's just a coincidence? Come on, dude. You're not that gullible, are you? You tell me all the time how much smarter you are than me, and you very well might be, but you're not coming across it right now. Don't sit there and act like it's that far-fetched to think that your program, who recently has been slapped on the wrist for cheating, should have been given a lot more of a punishment for the cheating. A lot of sanctions, right? A lot of suspensions, show causes, all that stuff. They don't just hand that out for, oh, yeah, he was just casually looking off the paper next to him. No, they stole the answer sheet. Come on now. We're not going to sit here and do this whole BS thing of, well, I found a report that tells me something that I like, so I'm going to go with that. What report? Anyways, it is what it is. Troy says, "Quit crying." Who's crying? If I have tears, it's tears of laughter, my dude. I enjoy watching your program continue to humiliate itself. Even when they win, they humiliate themselves. They won a national championship. They humiliated themselves. Cheating scumbags. Ryan Day, I got to give it to him. He has done a hell of a job turning it all around. And just, the PR where he was, in one calendar year, has done more in one calendar year to dominate this rivalry than Michigan the previous 4 years with the 4 straight wins. Because he's doing it with class. He's doing it with, next team up mentality. It's coach speak. It's boring. It's this, that, and the other. But you know what? Sometimes boring is good. So there's that. Is what it is. Tears of joy. Yeah, Yogi says tears of joy. Yes, I'm it's tears of laughter, my guy. I'm not even. What are we doing? Who's crying? No one's crying. I'm a fan of the number 1 team in the country who wins the right way. They're the defending national champions. They won a clean national championship. They didn't have an asterisk next to theirs. My team just beat your team. They whooped your team's ass at the big house. Who's crying? I have no clue what you mean by that. And then, yes, see, this is what I love. So I don't know who this is on YouTube. KM, whatever. KMAGX87. Shout out to this guy or gal, this guy, whatever. Messages into the show and says, how about Ryan Day telling Sharon Moore what to do on his own field? It was an alpha move. It really was an alpha move. And I know what this guy's talking about. So after the game, It's after the handshake. It wasn't all smiles and hugs. It was just a respectful handshake, and they're about to move on. That's when the security started getting a little tight because the players started kind of coming together. That's when you had Michigan, who had pre-choreographed all of this. They knew they were going to lose, so they talked before the game. Hey, guys, when we are done getting our ass kicked by the Buckeyes today, we all need to meet at center field to make sure that they don't come plant a flag. The reason I know that they knew they were going to lose is because if you went into a game thinking you were going to win, you wouldn't even have to plan how you were going to deal with the loss. Losers. So there you go. There's that part. After the handshake, as to what this guy's alluding to, Ryan Day said, Sharon, if we don't get these guys off this field, we're going to have a problem. Sharon Moore shook his head up and down, agreed, and then went on to get his guys off the field, and Ryan Day would go on to take his guys off the field. Ryan Day was the alpha. He had face in that situation. I know exactly what he's talking about, and I absolutely love that as well. He had control. Man, oh man. All right, I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. I thought that, we're going to talk about Ohio State, Michigan yesterday and kind of move on to some other college football angles and stuff. But then when I hear that Michigan tried to cheat again, I just had to make sure. Brad Shell says OHIO, baby. I mean, what? Michigan. I love it. This is how I know Ohio State is back at the top of the mountain. For one, they're national champions, the number one team in the country, undefeated. But this is what Michigan does. When they feel like they've lost control, and they start cheating. That's what led to the Connor Stallions thing to begin with. Ohio State dominated their ass for years. Harbaugh was about to get fired. Harbaugh had to agree with his bosses, please don't fire me. I'll take less money to stay. And that's what happened. He had to take a pay cut to stay. And not only will I take a pay cut, I will find some scapegoat dude that's going to come up with a cheating strategy to put us in position to win. And that's what happened. And then he doesn't get fired. They just agree to part ways, whatever. He goes to the NFL. Last year Michigan wins. It's all fine and everything's fine and dandy, right? They know they're going to lose this year, and they already had they premeditated plan to cut the communication between Ryan Day and his quarterback. Ryan Day had an inkling. He shared that in the press conference today. And you have Michigan fans saying, well, how do you know? How do you know? You don't think it's a coincidence that Ryan Day gets a tip? Ryan Day gets a heads up message that, hey, they're going to mess with your communication line between you and your quarterback. So they had it all pre-planned out of how they were going to handle that when it happened, and sure enough, it did. You don't think that was a coincidence? Or you think that was a coincidence? I'm sorry. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't. You tried. You didn't even foul tip it. You just struck out. Embarrassing. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.
Back to the Justin Kinner Show, right here on ESPN Dayton, 1410 Wing AM.
937-518-1410. That's the real number to call in and text into the show, of course. I'm Justin Kinner, the Justin Kinner Show, presented by our friends over at Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits. The Dayton Weight Loss Secret Program has successfully helped thousands of people lose 20 to 30 pounds in the first month or two, myself included. You can schedule your free consultation in person or virtually by calling 937-999-1480 or online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. No injections, no endless workouts, none of those prepackaged meals that look better on the outside than when you actually warm them up. Again, it all helps reset your metabolism. I had a lot of success with it. Still doing the program, of course. And if you want more information, you want your free consultation, all you got to do is give them a call one more time, 937-999-1480, or get more information and schedule your free consultation online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. All right, so coming up, it's conference championship weekend. And as of now, here are the locks. Ohio State, Indiana, I think they're locks. They're in the playoff. Georgia, Texas Tech, Oregon, Ole Miss, Texas A&M, Oklahoma, in your group of five. All right? Like that's kind of where we're at with that. Now, Alabama, BYU should be safe. Right? Like Alabama should be safe as long as they don't get blown out in their championship game. You know, a win, they're definitely in. Don't get blown out, you're most likely in. So that's 11 spots right there. That's about one spot left and this is what I've been rooting for years. I don't think we got enough of this. I don't think we got any of this during the college football playoff 4-team era. Every year, it all took care of itself. There was not many years, if any year, where I can remember waking up on Selection Sunday and like, oh my gosh, the committee, they have a very tough decision to make. Now, some believe that the last year that they kept Florida State out, that wasn't really a tough decision. That was a controversial one, and that was chaos, and I guess that was the most chaotic one. But I'm still on the belief that Florida State should not have been let in. Your resume was built on what you looked like with your Heisman contending quarterback. Your Heisman contending quarterback got injured. You played a few games without him, won, but looked absolutely horrendous winning. And we all know that style points matter, whether you want to admit it or not. It's not just the result. It's not what you say. It's how you say it. It's not that you win. It's how you look in the win. Just like you could lose, but you better look good losing. Like Indiana, for instance, I think Ohio State's 1, Indiana's 2. If Ohio State wins by 10 to 12 points, I don't think Indiana should drop from 2. I just think, hey, they played the number 1 team and lost. But if Ohio State goes and wins by 27, 28 points, all right, you're not going to convince me that Indiana's the true number 2 team in the country. You can move them. There are losses that are good losses. I know Kev hates that. When him and I were doing the show together, when he pops on, he doesn't like the phrase good loss, but there are good losses. There are beneficial losses. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. But we saw that take place, like, you know, as far as that goes. So there's a lot of potential chaos here. There's one spot open. Okay. There's one spot that is open currently for potentially, based on how we assume things are going to play out. Miami, Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Texas, and Virginia. And Miami has the best case of them all to get in. I actually believe, Texas has 3 losses. This is where I think Texas is the chaos. Texas is bringing all the drama right now. Because if you are an Ohio State fan, if you enjoyed that Ohio State-Texas matchup, if you enjoy good football in the month of September, I highly suggest you really start to pull for Texas to make the playoff. I think we are going to see a sweeping change in the non-con schedules moving forward if Texas gets left out of the playoff. People are crapping all over Texas, saying, well, you shouldn't have lost 3 games. And maybe they're right. But they've also they've also had to play, they beat the number 3 team in the country 27-17 in Texas A&M. They beat the number 9 team in the country in Vanderbilt 34-31 earlier in the season. right? They played 4 top 10 teams this season. They played Vanderbilt, they played Georgia, they played Texas A&M, they beat Oklahoma. They lost to Ohio State, but they played 5 top 10 teams this season. You played 12 games, 5 of those teams were in the top 10. That's a hell of a schedule. Oh, they have 3 losses. Well, I mean, if you're playing 12 games and 5 of those games are against top 10 opponents, I expect you to come out a little unscathed. I don't expect you to come out unscathed. They have wins over the number 3 team in the country. They beat number 6 Oklahoma. Right? They beat number 9 Vanderbilt. Now, they did lose to Georgia, a top 5 loss, and they lost in week 1 against Ohio State 14-7. Now, the reason this is important is because there's a lot of teams. If you look at Indiana, if you look at their schedule and what they did this season, they did a very, very solid job. They went undefeated. They did exactly what they were supposed to. But you can argue that Indiana only played one real team with the heartbeat, and that is Penn State. Now, you're saying, well, hold on. Penn State, Oregon. That Oregon was the number 3 team in the country. They went to Oregon, and they won 30-20. Outside of that, Illinois was a good win at the time, but Illinois, Iowa, Michigan State, UCLA, Maryland, Wisconsin, Purdue, Penn State. I mean, that's not the Penn State that we thought they were going to be coming into the season. If you would have told me back in September that Indiana was going to go to Penn State and win in October, I'd have been like, oh, then hell yeah, Indiana definitely the number 2. But the Penn State that they beat is the team that lost 6 straight games and also fired their head coach well before the halfway point of the season. They also played Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State. And I like this schedule for Indiana. I think it makes a lot of sense if you are in Indiana. People were blasting them for their schedule at the beginning of the season. I think this makes sense. Why would you put a potential landmine in your non-conference schedule when you already have to play at Oregon, when you already have to play at Penn State? Now, there's a lot of bad teams up and down that Big Ten schedule. But you only need 1 or 2 opportunities to prove that you're a legit top 10, top 5 team. And they did that. They proved it at Oregon. They proved it at Penn State. They beat Illinois handily 63-10. And they beat up on their non-conference opponents. I mean, Indiana State, it's Indiana State, but they won 73-0. That's what you should do to weak teams like that. So if you are Texas and you don't play Old Dominion, Kennesaw State, and Indiana State, and you go ahead and you put in Ohio State on your schedule, all while having to play, a very tough schedule. Texas played a very tough schedule this season. Everyone that's mocking them and their schedule, I mean, come on. They had to play at Florida. I get that Florida is not very good, but it's still Florida, right? You play Oklahoma. All right, they played Vanderbilt. They played at Georgia. They played Texas A&M. I'm sorry, but if you were Texas and you had the Indiana approach and you took Ohio State off that schedule and you played a who the hell is that university, that means you finished the season with 2 losses. You are a top 10 team, and you are sitting comfortably this weekend heading into conference championship weekend. You know you're a playoff team. But because you challenged yourself in the non-con, but because you decided that we weren't going to play a weak opponent in the non-con and you lose 14-7, now you're going to miss the playoff. And I agree. Sarkisian was asked about this earlier today. He said that, yes, they're going to, if they miss the playoff, they are going to take a different look at their scheduling approach moving forward. We could potentially not see a return game of Ohio State at Texas next year. Now, maybe not. I think it's kind of too late in the game to take a game off. I would have to go look. I don't know what is the latest or the earliest that you could take a game off, or the latest you could take a game off and replace it. I think that'll be tough to do. But if I'm Ohio State and I see Texas get left out, because by the way, and I need to look this up because I think next year's schedule is pretty brutal for Ohio State as far as that's concerned. Texas this year could be an Ohio State problem next year. So Ohio State, keep in mind, they play at Texas in week 2 next season. They also, and Indiana's for real now. You got Indiana at home last year in your top 5 showdown. You're getting them on a neutral field, even though it's in in Indianapolis this weekend. But Ohio State will be at Indiana next season. They will be at Iowa, at Nebraska. They obviously have Michigan. They will have Oregon, and they'll be at USC. So Ohio State has to play at USC. They have to play Oregon. They have to play Michigan. You have to play at Indiana, and you have to play Texas. This is the same situation that Texas is in. If Ohio State stubs their toe and they lose 2 games in the Big Ten and they lose a close one to Texas, they could be left out of next year's playoff. And then you're going to say, are you going to have the same energy with Ohio State next year that you have with Texas? I'm Team Texas at this point. We should reward teams for challenging themselves in the non-conference. And that's what I've always respected about Ohio State. They always challenge themselves in the non-con. And people will say, what are you talking about? They play Ohio and they play Grambling. There's not one team in the country that plays a good opponent every single week. I believe challenging yourself in the non-con means playing one premier opponent in the non-con with a couple tune-up games before you get to conference play. And that's what Ohio State did this year, and they do it next year. They have Ball State, Kent State, at Texas. Those are 3 great games to get yourself prepared. You got a tune-up game with Ball State on September 5th. You play at Texas on the 12th, and then Kent State at the Shoe on the 19th before Indiana. So I look at all of this right now. I'm thinking ahead. Ohio State next year at USC, Oregon, Michigan, at Indiana, at Texas. I'm sorry, but I'm Team Texas on this. As far as I'm concerned, Texas should be in the playoff. Reward your teams for challenging themselves in the non-con, because Texas could have gone the easy route and played who the hell is that university, and they would be a lock for the playoff. I'm not punishing Texas for that. Texas should be in. Put Texas in the playoff. They deserve it. They challenged themselves. They played a hell of a schedule, because that's what Sarkisian was saying earlier today, and I agree with him. Are we just looking at is the committee just looking at a team with a bunch of wins at the end of the season and big stats because you played a bunch of nobodies? Or are they going to take into account the fact that you challenged yourself? To Miami's credit, they finished with less losses. They're 10-2. They did play Notre Dame in the non-con. All right, they did play Florida. They won that game against Florida. They only have 2 losses, but let's be clear. They play in the ACC. Their schedule is significantly weaker. And I'm not doing the, oh man, I'm an SEC homer. I'm not. It's just common sense. Look at that schedule. No other team in the country played 5 top 10 opponents this year. And Texas just closed out the season with a top 3 win against Texas A&M. Texas should be in. Texas should be in when it's all said and done. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio, 937-518-1410. Put your hatred for Texas and the SEC aside. Imagine Ohio State a year from now. A year from now, Ohio State, very similar, okay, very similar to Texas, plays a brutal schedule. Okay, Texas played a brutal schedule this year. They played at Ohio State. They played at Florida. They played Oklahoma. They played Georgia. They played Texas A&M. They played in Vanderbilt. I skipped over them because I'm looking at the brand of Vanderbilt, and I don't give them respect. Vanderbilt's a good team. They're a playoff contender as well. They played Vanderbilt and won. They played 5 top 10 opponents. They won 3 of those 5. They should be in. No other team in the country has played 5 top 10 opponents. So take your hatred for Texas and the SEC out. Put yourself, as Buckeye fans, a year from now in a similar situation, because Ohio State, they play at Texas, they play at Indiana, they play Michigan, they play Oregon, and at USC next year. They could be next year's Texas. They could be next year's Texas. And I promise you, you're not going to sit there and say, oh, well, they have 3 losses. Ohio State shouldn't be in. You're going to say, well, with that schedule, what did you expect him to be? Yeah, Texas should be in. What do you think? 937-518-1410. We'll get your reaction when we return.
ColumbusEquipment.com.
Now, back to the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
All right, and we are back. I'm Justin Kinner with you here on a Tuesday. A lot of college football talk in that opening hour. We got some NFL stuff, some college basketball coming up around the corner. It's that time of year. Dayton always looks good, November, December. We all fall for it. Don't fall for it yet. Don't fall for it. We'll get to that. Rick Pitino, Dayton Flyers head coach. Oh, no, St. John's head coach. All of a sudden, really wants to see Dayton in the Big East. If I'm his son, Richard Pitino over there at Xavier, I'd be like, hey, Dad, why don't you sit this one out? Why don't you focus on your gambling-infested team over there in New York and worry about your own team and your own problems? But we'll get to that coming up here around the corner. One thing we didn't really get to spend a lot of time on just because obviously, being off the last couple days of last week due to the holiday, the Bengals not playing on Sunday, so we didn't really get to instantly react. But man, oh man, can we talk about the Bengals and how very similar to, there's like a parallel between them and the Reds right now. How many times have you been all in on this team? And how many times have you quit on this team? Now, I'm a Reds fan, and I was in on the Reds, out on the Reds. In on the Reds, out on the Reds. I quit on them 100 times. But I bought back in 100 times. And I'm not a Bengals fan, but I'm not going to lie to you. They started out 2-0. I know they always play bad football to start the season. So if you're 2-0, playing bad football, imagine what you're going to do when you start playing good football, right? So I was in on the Bengals early. Obviously, Joe Burrow goes down. I took a few steps back, and then I saw how bad they were defensively, worse than even I thought, and then I was all the way out. Then they got Joe Flacco, and I bought back in. And then they lost to the Jets and the Bears, and then I jumped back out. And I stayed out for a while because I thought that the Ravens, who started out 1-4, you get Lamar Jackson back, they're going to take off. Rest is history. The Ravens are the Mets in this story, or in this comparison here. Because I'm back in on the Bengals, just like I was back in on the Reds, but I wasn't back in on the Reds because of what they can do, and I'm not back in on the Bengals because of what they can do. I got back in on the Reds because of what the Mets weren't doing, and I'm back in on the Bengals because of what the Ravens aren't doing. And you guys know me, I've never been in on the Pittsburgh Steelers. They are frauds. They always have, not always have been, but in recent history, they definitely have been. Mike Tomlin, I think, is one of the most overrated coaches in the NFL. I'm so sick of hearing about leader of men, this, and the other. You guys know how I feel about that. We're moving on from that. But this is about the Ravens. Because, yes, they may be tied with the Steelers for first place, but I have no respect or fear or concern about the Pittsburgh Steelers. So let's put the Browns and the Steelers in their own embarrassing little category over here. All right, cool. We just did that. Just like I was in on the Reds for what the Mets weren't doing, I'm in on the Bengals because of what the Ravens aren't doing. The Ravens might be bad. And at the beginning, it's because injuries. So I was like, all right, let's not be concerned about the Ravens' injuries. But they're a little healthier now. Lamar Jackson, I think, is healthy unless they're hiding something. I mean, it is a Harbaugh leading the team. Let's not sit there and act like the Harbaughs are all, innocent people by any means. Is Lamar just bad now? Because he's been bad for a minute. He has not even come close. I mean, last year probably should have won MVP. I was fine with Josh Allen winning it, but it's a storyline award. Lamar was better last year than his second MVP that he won. We're talking about a guy that is a near 3-time MVP winner looking like absolute garbage right now. The AFC North is always one of the best divisions in football, and it is so bad right now. And the Bengals get Joe Burrow back. They get a big win on Thanksgiving night, and I see a lot of you jumping back in. We're back in it. You're telling me there's a chance. You are 2 games out of the division, and there's 5 games left to go. And the Ravens and the Steelers have to play each other 2 more times. I mean, this is a situation where Cincinnati has a legit shot to not just make the playoffs, but actually win this embarrassingly bad division right now. But I also look at what's coming up for the Bengals. I see that Cincinnati has to go to Buffalo this week. Luckily, you just beat the Ravens at Baltimore. So you're at Josh Allen and the Bills this weekend, they're not playing their best football. You have Baltimore at home in a couple weeks. They're not playing their best football. You should beat the Dolphins. You should beat the Cardinals. You should beat the Browns. It's not crazy. This is what Zach Taylor teams do when Joe Burrow's healthy. They win late in the season. That's why I've always thrown out this, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I did a segment last year. I had the numbers pulled where since 2020, Mike Tomlin's record in the final 7 games of the season is horrendously bad. And I have to go pull the numbers on this again. Zach Taylor has one of the highest win percentages in the final 2 months of the season. Mike Tomlin has one of the worst. You're always going to take Mike Tomlin over Zach Taylor, but at the same time, I'm always going to take a coach that has their team prepared to play at the most important time of the season. Although sometimes, because of how ill-prepared they are to start the season, that's what ultimately cost them. But for the off-for-sake chance that you get into the playoff, I would much rather be Zach Taylor and the Bengals than Mike Tomlin and the Steelers. Sure, the Steelers always get off to significantly hotter starts every year. Last year, they were 4-2, and everyone was doing the annoying, I can't believe they're moving on from Justin Fields. They're 4-2. Let the train wreck, all right? It's going to wreck. It always does. Sure enough, it did. They got off to a hot start this year. They were 4-1. Let the train wreck. It always does, and it has. The Bengals, it pains me to say this as a Bengals hater, as you guys call me, they have a legit shot. They have a legit shot. What I don't know and what I do have questions about is the defense better? Did the defense get better the last couple of weeks? I mean, they gave up 26 points against the Patriots, yes. But they still showed a lot more resistance. It wasn't the 47 and 39 points that they were giving up against the Jets and the Bears. Coming out of the bye week, they gave a little bit more resistance. They held the Ravens to 14 points. Now, is that the defense being improved, or is it the fact that the Ravens have just been booty cheeks for quite some time now? The Ravens are 6-6. They got Lamar Jackson back. They had won 4 straight. But even while winning 4 straight, Lamar Jackson has just been horrible. Lamar Jackson has not been very good. So, and by the way, that was Lamar Jackson's probably one of his worst starts ever. But the question I have is was Lamar Jackson bad because the defense took it to him, or has Lamar Jackson just continued on this path of just not being very good? Lamar Jackson on October 30th threw for 204 yards against the Dolphins. Since that game, he has only thrown for over 200 yards once, and technically it was against your Cincinnati Bengals, but he hasn't thrown a touchdown since November 9th. And it's December 2nd. He threw for 176 yards against Minnesota, 193 yards against Cleveland, 153 yards against the Jets, and 246 against the Bengals. I don't know if I believe the Bengals have a shot if, in fact, this defense legitimately has improved. I just don't know if it has. The Patriots are a very solid offensive team. They're not an elite offensive team. But my rebuttal to myself, as I argue with myself, as it's the Kinner and Kinner show now, is, well, the Jets aren't a good offensive team at all, and you let them put 38 up. All right, well, what about the Bears? The Bears are pretty solid offensively, but my God, you made them look look significantly better than those early 2000s Rams teams with Marshall Faulk and Kurt Warner and Isaac, Bruce and all those guys. And you made them look better than these Kansas City Chiefs when Patrick Mahomes, all right, had Tyreek Hill. I mean, that's how good you made them look. So I don't know what to make of this Bengals team. I will say this. I think y'all, Joe Burrow, obsessed. I mean, you all are so obsessed with this dude. Joe Burrow came back this past Thursday night on Thanksgiving. Here's my only negative complaint about you Bengals fans for the way you acted this past Thursday. Be happy that he's back. But I'm not going to – I see every one of you falling for it. The Bengals are back because Joe Burrow's back. Joe Burrow, I'm here to tell you right now, I'm questioning this defense. But they might be onto something. Joe Burrow's going to get all the credit for if this team goes on to win out and ultimately have a shot to make the playoffs, right? But the only way that's going to happen is if the defensive side of the ball actually has improved. Joe Burrow's going to get all the credit if they make the playoffs, but the only way they're going to make the playoffs is if the defense improves. And here's my point. Joe Burrow came back and threw for 261 yards and 2 touchdowns, and he completed just a little bit below 50% of his passes. Right? Or he completed just over 50% of his passes. Here's the thing. Man, Joe Burrow comes back and look how much better they look. I don't think they did look that much better offensively. What did Joe Burrow do that Joe Flacco wasn't doing? Joe Burrow threw for 261 yards. Joe Flacco averaged 276 yards a game. Joe Burrow threw 2 touchdowns. Joe Flacco averaged 2.5 touchdowns a game. Joe Burrow completed just a hair over 50% of his passes. Joe Flacco completed 63% of his passes. Joe Burrow didn't come back and do anything better than what Joe Flacco was already providing for them. You want to know what the difference was? It was the 14 points that the defense gave up compared to the 30 points a game that they were giving up, which was a historically bad number. It was the worst scoring defense in the last 50 years. So when the worst scoring defense in the last 50 years all of a sudden only gives up 14 points and your starting quarterback returns and puts up numbers that are below the average of what the backup was doing, explain to me how the hell Joe Burrow is getting all the credit for the win against Baltimore this past Thursday night on Thanksgiving. I'm sweating because I'm so annoyed with you guys. What are we doing? Be happy that Joe Burrow's back, but I'm not going to sit here and let y'all disrespect Joe Flacco and act like, oh, thank God Burrow's back because we've been missing this. You were getting this, and you should be excited that Joe Burrow's back because it's your starting quarterback. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend like everyone else is doing that the Bengals weren't already getting this. Joe Burrow's numbers were not even better than the averages of what Joe Flacco was doing in his absence. But my gosh, he comes back and, oh, look, Joe Burrow comes back and they win a game. Yeah, Joe Burrow comes back. It's the defense that's back. The defense is back. The defense gave up 14 points to the Baltimore Ravens and put them in position to, by the way, the same amount of points that they were averaging in Joe Burrow's absence is what they put up on the board with Joe Burrow back. You know what Joe Flacco wasn't getting? A defense that only gave up 14 points against a 2-time MVP. Be happy that Burrow's back, but don't sit there and act like, oh, Burrow's back, and that's why. Stop it. Joe Burrow coming back, feel confident about it, great. But he's not providing you anything that you weren't already getting. And the only way you're going to make the playoffs is not Joe Burrow being back, it's the defense looking like it has a pulse. Because you continue to force turnovers. Because, by the way, that's why they were winning games early in the season. When they started out 2-0, the offense wasn't very good. But they were forcing a ton of turnovers early. They forced 3 turnovers or 2 turnovers against Cleveland in week 1. They forced multiple turnovers against Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars in week 2. They won both of those games despite average offensive numbers. Poor offensive numbers in week 1. And guess what? Baltimore, it was right back to the way it looked in weeks 1 and 2. The defense was swarming the field. They were getting to Lamar Jackson. They were forcing turnovers. They were breaking up passes. They looked good defensively. That's why they won. Joe Burrow contributed, looked solid coming back. He's only going to get better, but I'm here to tell you, I will not, as a Joe Flacco fan, I will not let you guys sit there and act like, oh, thank God Burrow's back because now we have a shot. Joe Flacco was giving you that shot. The defense was shooting down all the shots that he was giving you. If the defense performed like they did on Thursday night, you kick the Jets' ass. You kick the Bears' ass. If the defense performs the way that they're supposed to, you beat the Patriots. Like, that's the thing. Joe Burrow is getting the defense that Joe Flacco didn't get. Blame the defense for this. Stop giving Joe Burrow deserves a lot of credit, but he doesn't deserve all the credit, and that's what you phonies all do. You're not Bengals fans. You guys are Joe Burrow fans. I've been telling you that for a long time. You're not true fans of this team. You're only a fan of the quarterback. There's a reason why, when I started this show years and years and years ago, Bengals didn't really move the needle. Joe Burrow comes in, the needle's moving. Well, that's because they're winning. They're actually not. Joe Burrow's win percentage is the same win percentage as the Andy Dalton era. Didn't know that, did you? You didn't realize that, did you? Joe Burrow's win percentage is pretty much the exact same as Andy Dalton's win percentage in Cincinnati. So don't tell me that, oh, they're winning more. That's why we're all watching. They're not winning more. In fact, this is probably going to be year 3 of missing the playoffs. Don't give me that nonsense. Don't give me that nonsense. Dan Flouty says, Burrow didn't throw pick sixes or any interceptions. Grateful for Flacco, but threw killer interceptions. Oh my gosh, you're gonna poo-poo on Joe Flacco? You guys, this is why y'all didn't deserve. Now I'm pissed at Cleveland because you bum-ass Bengals fans are gonna sit there and say, thank God Burrow's back. He's why we're winning now. Because that Flacco guy just wasn't any good. No. Y'all don't get to do that. Y'all don't get to poo-poo on Joe Flacco. You were fortunate that you got Joe Flacco to begin with. Joe Burrow didn't do anything that Joe Flacco already wasn't doing. Joe Burrow gets a defense that gave up 14 points. Going to sit there and do this stuff. Yeah, this is why I root against your team, because of stuff like that. Thank God we don't have Joe Flacco anymore. You only had a shot in Joe Burrow's absence because of Joe Flacco. Man. Between Michigan cheating and Bengals fans poo-pooing on Joe Flacco, my blood pressure's up today. Anyways. Jake North. Oh, Jake North. The Daily Bengal Fan Bash Session. My favorite tradition on my commute home. Well, I appreciate that you listen at least. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.
ESPN 1410. Back to the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
The Dayton Weight Loss Secret Program has successfully helped thousands of people lose 20 to 30 pounds in a month or two. Schedule your free consultation in person or virtually by calling 937-999-1480 or online at DaytonWeightLossSecret.com. I'm Justin Kinner. We welcome you back. The Justin Kinner Show presented by our friends over at Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun, food, sports, and spirits. Speaking of Frickers, the Sunday morning tailgate show, myself, College Football Hall of Famer Keith Byers, we will be at the Frickers in Troy coming up this Sunday, of course, and we'll be reacting to all things Big Ten Championship. I'm going to be probably on zero sleep because we're going to the Big Ten Championship game Saturday night. It's 8 o'clock. You know, I usually hate when Ohio State games are at noon. I would kill for a noon kickoff on Saturday so I can get back. But, yeah, that game's at 8. Let's be done around 11:30-ish, and you get back to like 3 a.m. Yeah, going to be a tough one. But hopefully talking about the Buckeyes being 13-0 and Big Ten champions after beating Michigan last week. I don't know if you guys heard this, but we opened up the show today talking about Ryan Day's interesting press conference. So I've had people reach out, say Michigan cheated again, because that's the headline on the YouTube and the Facebook link. I don't know what do you guys take away this? So Ryan Day talked today about, you know, the communication going down between him and quarterback Julian Sayin. And he was asked about it. He commented on it, but take a listen. For those of you who haven't heard this yet, take a listen. There's a certain phrase in here that got everyone to kind of turn their head a little bit and question exactly what Ryan Day just said about what happened on Saturday when communication went out between him and Julian Sayin and the Buckeyes win over Michigan.
Yeah, we lost communication there in the second half. But the good news was that earlier that week, I thought there may be an inkling that may happen. So we had a plan for it. We had a wristband plan, and then we would bring Julian over, and I was, just getting us through it until we get the headsets back up and running, which took a little while to get done. But yeah, just by chance, we had a plan for it, and so we were ready to go when it happened.
So there was a phrase in there. I don't know if you caught it. He said we had an inkling, or we were prepared for this because earlier in the week there was an inkling that this can happen. Why would there be an inkling that something like this can happen? Was he tipped off? You know what I mean? Like, why so luckily, Buckeye fans, same thing. Buckeye media, Buckeye fans, same thing. Asked Ryan Day about this. What do you mean inkling? Take a listen.
Sorry to interrupt. Inkling? Why did you have that inkling?
Oh, we're just ready for everything. Yeah, you just got to be ready for anything. And, when you go into any big game, you're always trying to put contingency plans in place for anything that could possibly happen. And so, yeah, I was in here on Friday, and I think some of the guys in the staff were looking at me sideways like, why would you think that would happen? I said, I don't know. We just got to be ready and be ready for anything. It's funny how your mind works.
So when he said that at the end, it's funny how your mind works. He winked at the media, and the media all began laughing because we all know what he was doing. He was subtly letting the world know they're doing it again. They're up to their typical antics again. And I thought it was very well done. I thought that he was just kind of putting it out there because he didn't have to do that, but he wanted it to be known. Yes, we had communication issues, but because we were prepared, because there was an inkling that this can happen, like he had the media in the palm of his hand, he phrased it that way on purpose because he knew he was going to get the follow-up question about inkling. So he answered it. He gave you the coach speak about the Boy Scouts always being prepared. They had the wristband with the plays on there for that communication. Obviously, Julian Sayin would go to the sideline and get direction from Coach Day during the Michigan game because there was an inkling earlier in the week that something like this can happen, and they were prepared for it. Now, you could say, well, yeah, they're probably always prepared for it, but there's a reason he let it be known in the press conference, guys. This wasn't a coincidence. Ryan Day, he's wiser now. He's been doing this a long time now, and he is now learning how to use the media to his advantage. He started using the media to his advantage in the week building up. He didn't give them any bulletin board material. He knew the significance of that game, but he didn't put anything out there that was newsworthy. After the game, we were all just salivating there waiting for him to say something of just something, right? To give us some kind of soundbite, something that we could hold on to. And it was all boring coach speak. He killed him with kindness. And I loved every bit of it. And to be fair, I loved no matter how he responded, I don't care. I was fine with either. Because if he would have gone the low route like we saw from Sharon Moore last year when he sprinted around the field mocking Ohio State fans, the fan in me was pissed off. But I love the storyline element, so I respected it. I loved it. If Ryan Day would have done that at the big house, I would have laughed. I would have got a huge kick out of it. But I also really enjoyed watching him being an adult and saying, hey, whatever. And I stated this in the opening hour that there's a difference. Like Ryan Day is maturing in this rivalry because what he is basically doing is, and they've been telling us this, like Ross Bjork, the athletic director, even confirmed it last year. The rivalry means an absolute ton. It is not absolutely everything. Some Buckeye fans hate that. And I get it. But that was another example on Saturday as far as why Ohio State does not make that game everything. Is it to their detriment sometimes? Maybe. But the ultimate goal is to win a national championship. Another goal is to win a Big Ten championship, something that they haven't done in quite a few years. And now they could do that, yes, because they beat Michigan. But we learned last year you don't have to beat Michigan to win a national championship. But he's matured in the rivalry because basically letting you know, I'm not going to sit here and get any more excited in the media about beating Michigan than when we won against Purdue. I'm not going to give you any more sound bites for beating Michigan from when we beat Rutgers the week before. Because when we got done with Rutgers, it was all about Michigan. Now that we're done with Michigan, it's all about the Big Ten championship game. And after they beat Indiana on Saturday, it's going to be all about the Rose Bowl and who they play in the college football playoff. It's all about who's next. It's not about that one game and that one game only because the season's not done because you beat Michigan. No, now the really important games are coming up. Now the games moving forward are all about championships, winning a Big Ten championship, winning a national championship. That's what I loved about that win on Saturday. And I wish, I don't even see Shaw in the comment section at all, which I'm surprised by. Yogi, I would have sicked Yogi on him if that was the case. Yogi chased, who was the other Michigan fan, Yogi, that was starting stuff in the chat earlier? It was our guy, Troy. Now, Troy's been a passionate listener for years. I like Troy, but we clash. We butt heads all the time. But Yogi scared, he chased Troy off. I would have had to sick Yogi on Shaw because there's no defense of this. And people could say, well, we don't know if it's true or not. You're right. But let's be clear. Ryan Day, he's not dumb. And he's not putting that out there if there's not tangible evidence of it. And I don't think Ohio State's going to pursue anything with it. Now, I think that they should, but I think it's just they want Michigan to continue to be embarrassed for all their cheating antics. This is what they do. To reset the stage that I did in the first hour, they, when they were losing 17 of 19, when Harbaugh's job was on the line, remember his seat got so hot that the only way to stay on the hot seat before getting kicked off was to take a pay decrease. He had to take less money to stay at Michigan. So he had to take less money to stay at Michigan because of the constant ass whoopings, belt to ass, every single year. Right? And then all of a sudden they start winning, and then you come to find out that the timeline matches up. They started winning right around the time that Connor Stallion started his little psycho cheating scandal thing. And it's not a coincidence that cheating scandal going on, winning happening, championships being won, rivalries being dominated. Connor Stallions gets caught, goes away. All of a sudden, they look like the program that they were pre-2020 or 2021. It's not a coincidence. So now that they've lost Harbaugh, they've lost Stallions, they've lost, the mystique of who they were, now all of a sudden we're back to our cheating antics again of, we're cutting the communication between Ryan Day and his quarterback. It doesn't surprise me one bit. It really doesn't. It doesn't surprise me. Now, to cover my behind, this is all allegedly stuff, but again, I don't think Ryan Day's putting this out there unless he feels pretty good about what happened. He knows what happened. He knows what happened. And besides, everyone out there saying, well, why don't you wait till you get more information? Michigan has lost all benefit of the doubt when it comes to any credibility in these types of situations. They've lost all credibility. They've lost our respect. So it is what it is. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. 937-518-1410. That's the number that you can call and jump in on the conversation. But yeah, I just thought the way Ryan Day handled that, I thought it was perfect. It was perfect. And I thought, embarrassing the program without having to call names or do anything like that is pretty crazy. College basketball, the Dayton Flyers, they're 6-2 on the season. They're back at home tonight. They have East Tennessee State coming to town. They are an 11.5-point favorite. But a lot of articles being put out about Dayton recently, and it's not just because of their 6-2 start and their hot start to the season. All the talks of Dayton to the Big East are picking up again, and it's because legendary coach Rick Pitino had a very interesting tweet that sparked all of the conversation once again. We'll talk about what that tweet said when we come back. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio.
everyone makes it home safe for the holidays.
Back to the Justin Kinner Show on 1410 ESPN Radio and on the stream at wingam.com.
Justin Kinner back with you here. Dayton's ESPN Radio, 1410 Wing AM. 441 here in the Miami Valley. Hope everyone's had a great snow day. I don't know how many of you got to stay home or work from home. I worked the first half of the day from home. I can't work. I hate working from home. I'm not disciplined enough to work from home. I get too distracted. So I have to be in the office. So I came to the office today. Nonetheless, it's a ghost town here. Everyone chose to work from home today, but I can't work from home. I can't do it. I don't know how many. I have coworkers too that are like, no, they would love to work from home every single day and not have to come in, and they'd be just as, they'd be just as productive. Not me. I'm not very productive if I have to work from home. So I'm glad to be back in here today. But 937-518-1410, that's the number to call and jump in on the conversation. Dayton Flyers, they're in action tonight. They are going to be welcoming in East Tennessee State. That's a 7 o'clock tip-off at UD Arena. Off to another hot start this season, obviously 6-2, as I mentioned. They got the ESPN Events Invitational. They got that 84-79 win in overtime against Georgetown. And then they played a top 10 team in the country in BYU, and they were competitive. They lose 83-79. But another win against another win against the Big East and a win against Georgetown, obviously, 84-79 there. They get the win against Marquette in overtime, 77-71. So they continue that. They beat Marquette last year on the road. They've had a lot of success against these Big East teams, and it's been fun seeing Dayton get to play these Big East teams because there's always there's always that deep down wish and feeling of excitement of what it's going to be like if Dayton ever does make it to the Big East. And there was a tweet over the weekend, especially after Dayton beat Marquette and then beat Georgetown, where there was a tweet that came out over the weekend that it was like, okay, there's some excitement here. And I said Georgetown, sorry, but the Marquette, the win over Marquette led to this tweet coming out about Dayton going to the Big East and how cool and special that would be. And none other than it was Rick Pitino. So Rick Pitino comes out. I said it 3 years ago, and I'll say it again. Dayton belongs in the Big East. Well, conveniently, that comes out on November 29th. And that's after seeing what happened with the win against Georgetown and, obviously seeing how they competed against BYU, and then they get the win at Marquette. And I always say Dayton, for whatever reason, just kicks ass in the month of November. They always put on shows in the month of November. They do a fantastic job. I mean, and they always get your hopes up because if you think back to last year, they had a huge lead over North Carolina in the Maui Invitational that they lost, but to lose 92-90 against North Carolina, you proved that you belonged on the same floor as the North Carolina. And then to go on to have to play, that was a top 12. They were the number 12 team in the country at the time. Then last year they played number 5 Iowa State, and they lose another close one, 89-84. And then they cap off the Maui Invitational by going out and not just competing with another top 12 team in the country, because they played number 12 North Carolina. They played number 5 Iowa State. They lose by a few possessions in both of those games, one possession against North Carolina. And then they go on. They beat number 2 UConn last year at the Maui Invitational, 85-67. Didn't just beat UConn, but blew them off the floor. And it's like, my goodness, Dayton, if you could do that, right? And keep in mind, they also, before they went to Maui, they beat Northwestern out of the Big Ten. So you have wins over Northwestern out of the Big Ten, right? You beat New Mexico State last year. You beat competitive against North Carolina and Iowa State, 2 ranked teams, and then you dismantle the number 2 team in the country, UConn, 85-67. So then you go on, you beat Marquette on December 14th last year at Marquette. Or at home, I'm sorry, against Marquette. You just beat Marquette there. The point is you go and you beat UNLV. You beat all these great teams. And then you go into conference and to A10, a significantly less impressive conference than the Big East and these Power 4 conferences, and you lose to George Washington, and you lose against UMass. You lose to George Mason. George Mason has actually been much improved over the last couple of years, but you're Dayton. You're supposed to be in the Big East. Why are you losing to UMass and George Washington and George Mason? Why are you losing to St. Bonaventure? Why are you losing to these teams so often? VCU is a quality program, but you lose to them every single year. In 2023, this was the Deron Holmes season, right? You go and you beat LSU in the Charleston Classic. You beat St. John's. All right, that was the Patino first, the St. John's. You beat St. John's. You're competitive against number 6 Houston that season. You do big things. You go and you show out on that stage. You beat Cincinnati in the Hoops Classic. And then the A-10 gets around and you're losing to Richmond. You're losing to VCU. Again, some of these aren't terrible losses, but if you're Dayton and is supposed to be in the Big East and you could beat Big Ten teams and you could beat these big teams, why are you losing so consistently to the VCUs of the world? Why are you losing to the George Masons of the world so consistently? Loyola. Now, Loyola won't be a problem this year, knock on wood, you would think. But my goodness. It just goes. It goes from bad to worse. Yeah. How about the ESPN Events Invitational a few years ago with that 2021-22 season? You beat Florida. That was the year you beat Kansas. Remember that? You beat Belmont to close it out in that ESPN Events Invitational, and then the season progresses, and you lose to VCU again. You lose to George Mason again. You lose to St. Louis, and some of these aren't horrible losses, but again, you lose to LaSalle. How do you beat Kansas? How do you beat Miami? How do you beat teams like that? And then you lose to LaSalle come A-10. So I get so irritated when Rick Pitino and you and others bring up the fact that I said it 3 years ago and I'll say it again. Dayton belongs in the Big East. That's always an easy tweet to put out in December, in late November. Dayton is a different animal in November, December. For whatever reason, whatever Anthony Grant does around Christmas time, he totally loses control of this team and he totally loses focus because this team, how do you go from battling it out with some of the top teams in the country? Okay, how do you go? To go to Marquette and win. Now, Marquette's not very good this season, but it doesn't matter. It's still a tough environment. But to go to Marquette, to beat Georgetown, BYU is a hell of a team, and you had the opportunity to beat them. You're probably going to be that, not probably, you're going to be East Tennessee State. They're going to be competitive against Virginia when they play them. At Virginia, you're going to be competitive when you have Florida State at UD Arena coming up here in a few weeks. So when Rick Pitino puts out a tweet that I've said it again 3 years ago, I'll say it again, they should be in the Big East. That's easy to put out in the month of November. But I don't want them in the Big East. You can't compete in the Big East because you can't dominate the A-10. It's the same thing every year. This was an article from Dave Jablonski in the Dayton Daily News last year. And this was heading into the A-10 tournament. In 28 A-10 tournament appearances, Dayton has lost its first game 8 times. They don't rout A-10 teams in the regular season. And by the way, they do have a winning record in the A-10. Let's not sit there. They do dominate in the A-10. It's not as if, all right, they don't win in the A-10. Anthony Grant, since he arrived at UD back in 2017 as the coach to now, they're 80-33 in the A-10. Now, you could say that that's dominating, but when you don't win that 10, you want to go to the Big East as if you're going to go there and dominate the Big East when you don't dominate the A-10. And it's a very lame argument on my end, but it's not. We always hear about the Big East chatter in November, December when you're competing with North Carolina and you're blowing out UConn and you're taking care of, you're competing with the top 10 BYU and you're winning against Marquette and you're beating Georgetown and you're going to compete and maybe beat Florida State in a few weeks. And then all of a sudden you get to A-10 play and you're trying your hardest to beat the George Masons and the VCUs, who are good programs, but they're not Big East programs. And you can't even beat these programs consistently enough to sit at the top. You don't get to the NCAA tournament enough because that's what it's all about. So you can call me a hater all you want, but the bottom line is this team underachieves in the A-10 way too often to sit there and look at a tweet like this from Rick Pitino and give it any kind of credence whatsoever. It's easy to jump on board the UD bandwagon in November, December. But I think what they do in November, December makes what they do in January, February so damn frustrating because the same team that just competed with the top 10 team in BYU, the same team that just beat Georgetown and won at Marquette will struggle with LaSalle when we get into A-10 play. I went to Hinkle on Friday with Wright State. Wright State got blown off the floor by Butler. Butler's pretty damn good, but they're not. Butler's projected. Butler, I mean, they have size, they have scores, they have shooters, they have everything. They're projected to finish second to last in the Big East this year. And that Butler team, as good, if not better, than this Dayton team. And that team projected to finish second to last in the A10 in the Big East. I mean, whatever, dude. Like, come on. I don't know what you want me to say to that. I'm impressed with the way they looked in that ESPN, Events Invitational, but I'm always impressed with UD in November and December. They always do this in November and December. And it's what makes what they do in January, February, and yes, even March so frustrating. One NCAA tournament appearance since Anthony Grant arrived here in 2017. One. Two, if you count 20, but there was no tournament in 20. And you could say, well, you can't ignore 2020. There seems to be an outlier season. There has not been one season close to that. It's not as if it's been, that, and then it goes away, and then it comes back. That was an outlier season. There's way more data to prove that who an Anthony Grant-led team is outside of 2020. That's who this team is what it is. But no, I'm not going to sit there and do, everyone got excited. See, Rick Pitino gets it. I said it 3 years ago. I'll say it again. Dayton belongs in the Big East. Put this tweet out in February. I bet you won't, because it's going to be tough to put that tweet out in February after a close overtime loss at LaSalle. That's just how it works. I'm Justin Kinner. It's the Justin Kinner Show, 1410 ESPN Radio. All right, so the second college football playoff rankings come out tonight. I'm really curious where Texas is. I'm really curious where a lot of these teams are going to be placed, because they're going to set the stage for the results of Conference Championship Saturday to have an impact. Okay, we're going to learn a lot tonight. Jason Fitz from Yahoo Sports, he's going to jump on with us on tomorrow's show. We'll recap tonight's rankings release, and we'll preview the Ohio State-Indiana Big Ten Championship game on Saturday. That's tomorrow's show. Until then, this has been the Justin Kinner Show presented by Frickers. Frickers, your home for fun food, sports, and spirits.
Need a U.S. passport? We can help. Hi, this is Mike Foley, your Montgomery County Clerk of Courts. Visit one of our convenient auto title locations in Huber Heights, Clayton, downtown, Moraine, and Centerville. Make